Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Barbara Etienne and delighted to welcome you to another episode of Speaker's Corner. This is the special program we run once a month with Jennifer Jones as our showrunner, producer, and all around star, pulling together themes around stories that community members want to tell, and they step up to the on the soapbox to tell their stories. So, Jennifer, you want to tell us a little bit about our guests and our theme today?
I do. Thank you for those lovely words, Barbara. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our August Speakers Corner. Can you believe it's August already? I know that I can't. I don't know where the year's gone. But just quickly before we start, August is a special month for us here on Speakers Corner, as it's our anniversary month, our first year anniversary. So that's exciting and fun to think about. So we have two guests here today. We have Lorinda Brandon from Name on the Recipe Card, and Lynda Heines is from Hindsight. And what these two writers have in common is food, and we all love food. They both write about food, but in completely different ways. I've been reading Lynda's publication for quite a while now, and it's always great to read about her mum's recipe book that she inherited and about her mum. And I've just recently come to Lorinda's Substack, and she writes about the amateur cooks at the Pillsbury Bake Off. So I'd never heard of the Pillsbury Bake Off before then, and it's been really fun to read about it. I probably should say, because we're all laughing, that I did think Pillsbury was a lovely little town in America. But yeah, I've been educated on that now, that it's a company. So Lorinda has been writing about each of these women who would otherwise be unknown. She'll tell you all about that. But huge thanks to both of you for coming along, and it's going to be fun to hear your stories. So, as you might have guessed, our theme is food memories and food stories. And for anyone who was at the preview earlier in the week, you will know that we're in for a fun time because we had quite a few laughs. And we have Lorinda here today to add to the fun. So, without any more chat from me, let's go right over to Lorinda. Hi, Lorinda. We're looking forward to hearing all about the Pillsbury Bake Off. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'll give you the backstory about how I ended up writing this blog. A couple of years ago, my mother-in-law passed on, and when she died, the one thing I wanted from her was this cookbook. Because you can see it's duct taped together. It still has her bookmarks in it. It's well loved. It's well used. She was just this wonderful home baker, and she grew up in the same time, the same era as the women in this cookbook. And I remember being so in love with the way she baked for her family. I didn't grow up in a house where my mother was not a baker, she was not a cook, and so we never had like homemade cakes or anything. I was the baker. And so this cookbook was out every time we went over there for any kind of event, birthdays and holidays, and she used it all the time. And so when she passed, I asked everybody, could I have that cookbook? So I inherited the cookbook, which was wonderful. It was very gracious of them to give it to me. And I started baking from it. And I was telling the gang just before we started recording, I started baking these recipes and they were so good. The cakes were so imaginative and so creative. And so I started looking at, well, who made this cake? And it turns out the women in this cookbook were from an era where they were listed under their husband's name. So I don't know who made these cakes. And they went to the Pillsbury Bake Off. They had this big moment where they got their recipes in cookbooks that were sold all over the place. They're in everybody's kitchen and they're invisible. So the project started just out of outrage, I guess is the best way to say it, because I was like, who are these people? So I started just researching them. I went through old newspapers and public records, and I started writing their biographies, mostly just to keep myself calm. And I bake every one of their recipes because, for one thing, it gives me context to them, but it also, these recipes are from an era. They use techniques and ingredients that we don't use anymore on a regular basis. And so I really have just fallen in love with, I'm working on, it's 10 years of bake-offs in this cookbook. And so I'm working on it 1 year at a time, which is 100 recipes per year. So I'm still in 1949, which is the first year Pillsbury had a bake-off. And so let me give, just for everybody who might not be living in America, who doesn't know what the Pillsbury Bake-Off is. Pillsbury was started out as a flour company. They now make all kinds of stuff. And so, but they're mostly known for baking products and flour. So in 1949, they decided there was a big push in America at the time. It was post-war, and America had actually gone through, the globe went through a lot of things, but America kind of had some other fun things in the middle. So we started with World War I. Then people got home for that, and they ended up in the Great Depression. There was the Spanish flu, or in the opposite order: Spanish flu, then the Great Depression, then the Dust Bowl, and then World War II. And so through all this time, there were food shortages. These people were trying to figure out how to cobble together whatever they had in their house to make dinner, or to try to bake a cake without having sugar or butter or baking powder. And so these recipes, these women who were brought up in this era were baking out of necessity in this incredibly restricted environment for a good 50 years. They grew up with food shortages. And so 1949 was when we were just settling back down. And World War II surfaced a problem that was not just American, but it was primarily happening in America, where we had a malnutrition problem. And you can imagine why. We had 40 years, 50 years of food shortages. And we were starting to do things like refine white flour, right? So we were stripping nutrients from food. So an amazing statistic is that in World War II, 35% of the recruits were turned away for malnutrition. So a third of the country was malnourished. And so the government did a whole program. They built a Department of Home Economics. They sent all of these regional representatives out to different states and had them teach canning classes and nutrition classes, and, help people learn how to grow their own food and raise their own chickens. And so they were really trying to get nutrition back into the American consciousness. In 1949, when Pillsbury was working with the government to publish recipes that were nutritious and trying to get people to think more deeply about a food plate, right? What should be on a dinner plate? And so in 1949, they hosted this bake-off. It was a big recipe competition. It was only going to be one time, and it was to promote their flour, which was, newly enriched with vitamins to, help us not be malnourished. And they got GE involved. They got, Hamilton Beach involved. So they took over the Waldorf Astoria, and they set up 100 kitchens basically in the ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria. And everyone who competed in that competition got to take home that whole kitchen. They got a new stove, they got a new mixer. And this is at a time when some of these women they'd never used electric mixers or electric ovens, and they had to have classes. All of these vendors held classes the day before the bake-off. Here's how you use the oven. Here's how you use the mixer. And so these women were coming in with their family recipes. Here's Aunt Mary's favorite pie. I'm going to make that. But now I have to learn how to use an electric oven in this moment when I'm competing on the world stage, right? In my mind, right? So it's my biggest moment in my life, and I'm facing down this new technology. But Um, so it was a big deal. It was a very big deal. And so I started researching some of these, like I've gone through, well, I've been doing it for a little over a year now. So I've researched almost 60 of these contestants from 1949 and just dug into their lives and tried to figure out who were they, um, and where did these recipes come from and what did they mean in the context. And a lot of these recipes are, you know, not what we use today because these women grew up not having baking powder, for example. So to our earlier conversation before the recording started, they used meringue, honestly, to leaven their cakes because they didn't have baking
Oh,
powder. And so you beat those egg whites into a froth, right? You make them nice and stiff. You fold them into the cake batter, and it helps the batter rise. It makes a dry cake, but it makes it rise. Um,
yeah.
and so it's that kind of technique that just I found it to be so fascinating. So the project has ended up being every week. It's called Name on the Recipe Card because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put their names back on the recipe card because it's all their husbands' names, Mrs. Joe so and so or Mr. John, Mrs. John Mays. It's not them. And so I want their names on the recipe card. So that's what I do. I research them. I researched the cooking techniques that might be different. Why were they using dates as a sweetener? Why were they using meringue as a leavener? You know, um, a lot of these recipes just make me ask the question, why is this so different than how I know how to make, a fudge cake or whatever? And so I have just found it so fascinating. And the women that I have researched. Some of them I have just fallen in love with. Um, and others I'm just amazed at what they were able to do at a time in our country when women couldn't easily have their own bank account. They couldn't easily run their own business. They were known by their husbands' names everywhere. And yet, some of these women rose above that. One woman, Ruth Maxwell, married 4 times. So the things I discovered about this time frame, divorce, like affairs, you find all kinds of stuff that you think, oh, no, they didn't do that then. No, these people divorced on a regular basis
Yeah.
and and had multiple marriages. Most of these women have been married multiple times, partly because you
Wow.
you couldn't make it on your own as a
Yeah.
woman. So your husband dies or divorces you, and you need to find another guy because
Yeah.
that's the way the world was. Um,
Yeah.
so many of these women were married 3, 4 times, but like Ruth Maxwell, who's one of my faves, she not only was married 4 times, she ran the first licensed nursing home in private nursing home in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and led the campaign to make sure other people could actually get licenses to do the same kind of work. She invented this. I don't know how many people are old enough to remember there was a Rice Krispies type cereal called Sugar Crinkles here in the US when I was a little kid. Well, she invented that. Post gave her money for the recipe and said, don't ever tell anybody this was your recipe. But that was her. And so
Oh,
it's sort of amazing what you uncover
yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
researching these people. And then just to, I know I'm babbling a lot, but let me just finish this one thought because this is where the genealogy just means everything to me. When people reply on my little blog, which is so unknown, I have had so many people who said, that's my grandmother, or that
Oh,
was my aunt, or that was my roommate's grandmother, or that was my great aunt that I knew was in my family tree, but I didn't know anything about her. And so I've had so many people who have found
mm,
their family on my
yeah.
blog, and it's
Wonderful.
just so gratifying. I had
Yeah.
one woman, Leona Funky, who I just also love. She submitted a recipe every year. So for the international audience, the Pillsbury Bake Off still goes on. It's in its like 82nd year.
Oh,
So it's
right.
every year there's a Pillsbury Bake Off and you submit your recipes. The only time they didn't do it was during COVID. They canceled it for 1 year. But this woman, Leona, she sent a recipe. She sent in a recipe every single year from 1949 until she passed away in 1980s. And she made it into the Bake Off 3 times. So she has all of these beautiful scrapbooks that show everything. And her family was so generous. They found my blog, they found her article, the post about her, and they contacted me and they scanned every one of her
Oh,
scrapbooks and sent it to me. So it's so much
oh,
information about how was the
yeah.
Bake Off run and who was there and what was that experience. And so that's the part that just really touches me. The recipes
Mm,
are interesting. The food history is interesting, but the real emotion for me is the people, is
people.
finding out
Yeah,
about these people and what they overcame and what they did in their
yeah,
life. And
yeah,
then when their family finds it, I'm just like so thrilled. I go running
yeah,
around the house. My husband will tell you, I go running, and no matter what he's doing, guess what? So it's just my favorite thing about the whole project.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, Lorinda, I'm not surprised that's your favorite thing about the project. That's just absolutely wonderful, isn't it?
It
Um,
really is.
I suppose it was something you weren't thinking about when you first started, reaching out to families and, that type of thing.
That's
So,
exactly right.
yeah,
I did it. I'm very conscious of the fact that you're uncovering, maybe some family dirt.
yeah,
People
yeah,
got divorced or applied for divorces and it wasn't granted, and then they had to
yeah,
live on with this person. And so I do want to try to like find family members for everybody and say, is this right? Is this accurate? Are you
yeah,
okay with this?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and I'm sure most of them would be. They must just Could you imagine how excited you would get, or I know how excited I would get if I found my ancestor on your publication, or anyone's publication? It's just a wonderful thing. And I have to say, I do share your anger about those women's names.
Right. Right.
I mean, they were amazing, weren't they? And to think that their names weren't even spoken. But we shouldn't be surprised, should we? Because when we research our families, it's so hard to research the women, you
That's
know.
right. That's
And
right.
my own mother, she goes under Mrs. Thomas Jones. She
Which
I
my
don't know whether she does now since Dad passed away, but that's only been in the past few years. But if she wrote a letter or had to write her name on a form, it was always Mrs. Thomas Jones. So
Well, I remember when I first got married, it was my mother's favorite thing was to send me letters with my husband's name because I think that was a thrilling thing for women back in that era
yeah,
when they first got
yeah,
married to be able to
yeah,
go by their husband's name. And so I think she
yeah,
thought it would be wonderful, but yeah,
yeah, and they're very proud.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that was just wonderful, Lorinda. I just wondered, does anyone else have any questions? Just pop your sound off if you're muted there.
The one thing I'm just struck with how in my world the idea of finding um antique photos and finding their home, found photos and finding their home. This is recipes and finding
Yeah,
their
Yeah,
home. So you answered the question about connecting with the actual descendants. But boy, you're now part of an amazing community of really breathtaking genealogists, including, by the way, Lynda Stufflebean is somewhere nearby for you. And who is in a previous conversation, we talked about how she could find anybody, anywhere. Hold my
oh,
beer,
yeah,
she's
yeah,
Oh,
really good.
I've got to talk to her. I have at least 10 blog posts that I started and then I ran into a wall. Like I can find the announcement when the woman got married and that's it. And I can't find anything else about her life. And to your point, Jennifer, the women disappear. They
yeah.
just
They just
evaporate.
disappear.
And
Yeah, yeah,
I I find that even more frustrating. So I have a
Yeah.
few of them where I know they were there and I wish I knew more, but
This is
I know the
just,
recipe. I've made the recipe, but I just can't find them. So you should send me her name because I need help on a
yeah,
couple
Will.
of these.
As a matter of
yeah.
fact, Kathy Stone here had
Kathy.
Lynda on her panel talking about privacy because the reverse side of not being able to find somebody is protecting your privacy when you just
Yeah.
incidentally disclose something. So go ahead, please, Kathy and Anne. We're
Of,
already
of,
into it.
of course, you know my question, which I put in the chat is, are they all those scrapbooks you got, and are they planning to be digitized?
Oh, well, I would have to ask the family because they aren't mine. Uh, that's an excellent
Because
point.
what
I
treasures do
know
you have?
the funky cousins will be watching this, so I'll put it out there to them because I think you're right,
Treasure.
Kathy. It's fascinating stuff. It's just fascinating. And
Yeah.
from my standpoint, where I've gotten so engaged with the Bake Off, it shows because she was in the Bake Off the first year, and then she was in the Bake Off in the 60s, and then she was in the Bake Off in the 80s. She was the oldest contestant in 1982. And
Ah,
the difference, everybody took the train in 1949. They
ah,
sent them
yeah,
train tickets. In 1960s, they sent them plane tickets, right? So just the world changed. And
yeah, yeah.
looking at the scrapbooks show you just differences in our culture and in corporations' budgets, right? Pillsbury was, helped by the government. They partnered with other vendors that first year. But Pillsbury is making money hand over fist now, and
Mm,
so
yeah.
they don't need that help anymore. So Kathy, it's a great idea. I will I will reach out to the Funky family and see if they want to do that.
That sounds like another
Yeah,
Substack.
Yeah, I
yeah,
know.
it
This is a whole
does.
other project. My retirement's getting very full right now.
Yeah.
Anne, go ahead,
And
please.
I don't have recipes for the person that I'm tracing. Um, I have menus, and she was Mary was executive secretary, and she ran a lot of events, even during the First World War, which is the area I'm focusing on. And I know they had rationing, and I know they had all sorts of things. Now, this would be ambassadors, American and British ambassadors, and sometimes the king and the duke. And I mean, so it was fairly high level, not everyone. But how do I find someone who can help me by looking at those menus and saying, this tells us this about that time, or it tells us that about that
Oh,
time? I
that's
yeah,
didn't know if
yeah.
that
interesting.
was something you could give advice on.
I would love to. I would love to. We should connect with each other because I think the trick is knowing. So in World War One, there was there were food shortages, but there
Yes.
wasn't actually rationing. The rationing was in World War Two. In World War One, it was really hard to get ingredients because shipping lanes were embargoed, and they were sending ingredients to the war. So they had unofficial rationing where they said to people, do without these things. And they printed all kinds of recipes that they would publish in the newspapers and in mailers to say, here's how you make a wartime cake, which was, they sound horrible, by the way. But so I think that there's a couple of different avenues that I've used that I can just throw out there. But um, one is to do some research on what was embargoed. So there were shipping lanes where things couldn't get through. One of the things that was very common in World War One were dates and Brazil nuts. You find those in a lot of recipes back then because those were the shipping lanes that were not closed off. So we could get things from South America. We couldn't get things from Europe that we were used to getting. And so I would start there with what were the areas, what were the food shortages in World War One? why, because sometimes, like I said, you couldn't get the ingredients here.
Yeah.
And other times it was because we had it, but we sent it to the war, right? We sent it to the soldiers.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I would research both those angles to see where does that leave you? What's the Venn diagram of what's left at home for everybody else? I would imagine that if you're setting up a dinner for ambassadors, you can work your way around food shortages.
I would think so. This was London, England, though, and it being
Oh,
an island, there was a lot of submarines, embargoes, like because so they were trying to starve out the British, and of course cut them off from France, where most of the fighting was taking place and things like that. So, but the whole idea of looking at the embargoes is an excellent idea because I can look at it and figure out, okay, what couldn't you get
yeah,
in
Mm.
London, England during the First World War?
Yeah.
Because a lot of things
Yeah.
were cut off.
right.
It's
Yeah.
a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Lorinda, that was absolutely fascinating, and it's left me with a lot of things that I'm wondering about. So I'll be heading back over to your Substack to catch up. So thank you. And I'm actually quite amazed that it's still going today. That really does amaze me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm thinking about entering just because it's like
Oh,
everything I
you
think about
should.
now.
You should. Okay, so we'll head over and to Lynda. Lynda, tell us about your mum and her recipe book.
Well, it's altogether different than what Lorinda's talking
Yeah.
about. Mine is my mom's, um, her ringmaster notebook, 25 cents, that she put together. Originally, what she was going to do is for the girls, for the three of us, she picked out her favorite recipes. And so she was going to make one for each one of us. Well, she died before she was able to do that, but I got the master copy. And it's interesting, I did research that she would have bought this in the early 60s, and it was 25 cents, but today it'd be like 265 to 282. And it's college bound, I mean, college lined, it's real thin. And of course, it's all her handwriting. It's all, she had used this. I mean, she really used this. Because when I got it after Dad died, um, in 67, or not 67, 87, um, I really never looked at it. I put it with my other cookbooks. There were two recipes in here that I did use, and I made my own cards so I wouldn't have to mess with this. But so I never really had done much with this, and I don't know why. About a year ago, I just decided I really like to see. Somebody may have written something about a recipe on Substack, and I thought, well, I think I'll see what her recipes are like. So one of the recipes, the very first one I started, besides the two I've always done, which is grandma's chiffon pumpkin pie and cherry pie cake, or it's cherry upside down cake. Besides that, there was I just I looked on here, and the one recipe, I'll get started again. The one that I started with was a lemon jello cake. And years ago, the thing about Mom, she was a cook. Unlike Lorinda's wasn't a cook, baker. Mom was a baker. She had gone to the Iga Hart cooking school, which in the 30s, Iga Hart manufactured Swansdown cake mix and in Evansville, Indiana. So, of course, they had cooking school, and they had cooking school throughout the United States using their flour. So a lot of her recipes call for those, and it's a cake flour, so it's a little bit lighter, makes things a little bit lighter. But so she had really loved baking, and through her diary, she talks about baking this and that, and of course, when we were growing up, we always had stuff around. I'm surprised we didn't get as big as huge, but we were all real thin, and we I guess we ran it off, but we had always had cakes and cookies and pies. Well, one of the things she loved to make was sheet cakes, which basically was using a half sheet pan, all those big pans, And she would make like chocolate and vanilla, but she made another one, and I never really knew what it was. And I always kind of wondered about it until in the 80s, I was at a place after it was during lunch, and I stopped at this little diner, and we were sitting there, and they had cake on the counter, and I thought, well, I'm going to try this. So I bought a piece of cake, and I tasted it. I go, oh my God, that's Mom's cake. So I asked them, and they said, well, it's lemon cake. And I go, I don't like lemon. I can't believe that, be lemon cake. So in my book, so I thought, well, when I started this, I thought that's the first thing I'm going to bake is I'm going to find maybe she's got a lemon cake in here. And she did. It was called lemon jello cake. And what surprised me more than anything, besides it tasted just like home, it has jello in it, but it also has cake mix. And she hardly used cake mix at all. But there are like 2 or 3 recipes in this whole book that have cake mixes. And I was really surprised because she never would do that. But it really, it was just amazing about all the different, the taste. Once you taste these, it just brings you home. Now, a lot of these recipes don't have names on them. So a lot of them were hers, and I don't know where she got them. And, I've looked, whenever I do her recipes, I look up to research if there's anything like them. And some of them I haven't found anything like them, but other ones they're real close to ones. Anyway, but there's also recipes of neighbors. And see, I know these people. And like Lorinda does it, I know these people's recipes. Mabel Vanstone had oatmeal macaroons, and she's somebody that she did get divorced, or she filed for divorce, and I did not mention that in the article. I just kind of thought, nah, I'm not going to do that, Then I have my favorite, and I want to talk about Mary Ann's toffee bars, or toffee squares, Brink Smalls oatmeal crispies, great cookies, Reed Allen's sour cream coffee cake. Oh, and Aunt Lena's fruit cookies, which I have not baked yet because as I did when I started this book, I would look at these recipes and I would go, ugh, I don't want to make that. How did these are her favorite recipes, or our favorite recipes. Why would she put them in this book? And my husband, Dave, was amazed that everything I've made has turned out. And I said, well, because she figured, she didn't put her angel food cake in here, which she would sit there and, with all those eggs in her lap and do that. Or she didn't put real hard things in here. She put the things that were easy for her kids to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's kind of how it went. The one thing I want to be sure I get everything I want to include in here. Lorinda, you talked about they were making people more healthy, or trying to get people more healthy. Well, in the 50s, the Sugar Council kind of took over, and everything in all these sweets most of them are so sweet that I've ended up, if I bake them again, I change them. I make less sugar. You just don't need that much. It's way too sweet. Mom used condensed sweetened milk on some of them, and I've changed it just to evaporated. Really, I'm not even sure I need evaporated. It's just too much sweet. But back in the 50s, in fact, I've got it written down here, in 1955, the Sugar Association won an award for advertising in the public interest. And what did they advertise? They advertised, you need to drink a soda or eat some ice cream before you have lunch, and that way you won't eat as much. And girls, you need
I'm
to eat
all
sugar.
in. I'm all in on this, Lynda.
girls, you need to eat some sugar because you're made of sugar. And these ads are just amazing from the 50s when they were pushing sugar on us because it was cheap. They found ways to make it, and it was so readily available. So parents were thinking, oh, well, you gotta, sugar's gonna help you. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. I was just amazed at that because I couldn't remember, and we talked about it on Sunday a little bit about sugar being so much in these, why they're so sweet. Of course, Dave just says, "Oh, they're fine. I like them," and he likes sweets. I don't like them that sweet. But one of the recipes that really surprised me was her fruit cocktail cake. And I go through these. I think, well, am I going to do it or not? And uh, it was just amazing because I don't like fruit cocktail, and I never did. And I cannot believe that she put it in her favorites of ours cookbook. And what happened was, well, so I decided to research fruit cocktails. So I went and looked in the percentages of things, and I found out that cherries are only 2 to 6%. And that's why I always wonder why there were never any cherries in there. I always like cherries. So if they put the whole can of cherries, I probably would have eaten it. But anyway, on the fruit cocktail cake was a really big surprise for me because I thought it's disgusting and it's way too sweet and it's weird, but I made it and it is one of my favorites. Absolutely love it. Now I've cut the sugar way back on it, but it is
Yeah.
so good. It's so moist and it's so great. But like Lorinda, I have done for those people those that have names on it, I have done some research. But my research is a lot different because I knew these people. But one of my favorites, and her son is here with us. And it's Ricky, but he's really Rick now. I knew him as Ricky, but it's Marianne Clayton's toffee. I call them toffee squares, but they were. In fact, I want to get that out to be sure I'm saying them right. Uh, but of course, they weren't Marianne Clayton. It was Mrs. Clayton to me.
Yeah.
It is toffee squares. But Marianne and her Mrs. Clayton and Mr. Clayton lived cat a corner from us. And they had 3 kids. There, 2 boys and a girl. The girl was young. Margaret was young, really, she's like a baby. But Ricky, or Rick, and his brother were Rick's a little bit younger than me, and Chris is older, and then my sister's a little bit older than Chris. So the 4 of us, you know, kind of played together. And anyway, so this what really kind of intrigued me about the story, first of all, is that I found a letter and in my mom's scrapbook from Marianne's mother, um, telling, well, I got to say the Claytons lived in our neighborhood from 55 to 60. So I was 5 to 10 years old. And after they left, I don't know how much mom wrote to Marianne, but her mother wrote when Marianne died in 66. So I remember, and I had forgotten about that. And then when I saw the letter, I remember mom being so sad because I assume like when the kids were off of school, all of us were off of school, Marianne was home with Margaret, and mom probably went over there, and they talked about recipes, and maybe she said, "This, my kids really like this. I bet your kids will too." And so we get this recipe. She writes it down, that kind of thing. But so when I got that, I thought, well, I wonder if I could find one of them. I really didn't know Margaret, so I wasn't going to contact her, but maybe I could find Ricky or Chris. And so Rick's laughing. So I, go through research, and he was really easy to find. So it was so neat because we've reconnected and talking about what it was like, and some of the things that I forgot about. He told me about how Dad put water on the driveway in the winter and froze it, and so we could ice skate on the driveway. And and there, I remember playing what do you call them, marbles in his front yard. And I have a picture of him and me. Jennifer, can you put that picture up of Rick and I on the
Uh,
swings?
no, but we'll put it in the notes
Okay, but
with the
there's a picture
recording. Yeah,
of Rick and I'm on a swing set on a swing, and he's right there with me, and it is so cute.
it
And I,
is.
I told him that I think I must have been a little smitten with him back then. And he's a younger guy, and I always have gone for the younger men anyway. So But there's, we kind of reminisced about our neighborhood, and there's just, and of course you weren't there that long, but it's really interesting. And I always wanted to be a boy because all that was in the neighborhood were boys, and they
Yeah.
got to do neat stuff. But we had a
Yeah.
place right down the street. It was an empty lot we called Spider Woods, and we'd climb trees, and went there and took a picture of it, and our trees are gone, but there are still trees there, and it's still an empty lot. It's still an empty lot because it's too small to build on. That's why still an empty lot. But anyway, but her recipe, like I said, is my favorite of, well, I have three favorites, but that's my favorite of the candy kind of thing. And oh, she's screen sharing something. And
Yeah.
there it
Oh,
Oh
thank you,
my
is.
Barbara.
gosh. Oh, look
Isn't
at you
that cute?
two.
It's so cute.
It is beautiful.
Sorry to
Anyway,
interrupt.
um, the her recipe is very easy, and it's you make a crust, you bake the crust, and then you take it out of the oven and melt your chocolate on it, chocolate chips or whatever, and then nuts, and then you put it in the refrigerator and firm it up, and then you cut it, and it is absolutely wonderful. So anyway, that was fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh, but anyway, there are lots of stories. The one, well, I'll share one more. Oh, what is her name? And I have to, okay, Brink Small's oatmeal crisp. Brink lived across the street from my grandparents, and mom and dad and the kids, we all lived on Riverside until I was 1 year old. Then we moved to Baird Park where I grew up. But she lived across the street, and I don't remember her, but she was a nurse, and she was a little bit older than mom. She was born in 1906, but she went through Deaconess and got to be a nurse. It was a 3-year program, and she graduated in June 26th of 1930. But she married Rufus, and I always loved his name, and I liked him. I remember him. But she married him June 14th. So she married him before she graduated. But they didn't, according to the Huntingburg Argus, which is a newspaper that she's from, where they're from originally until they moved to Evansville, um, they reported that they reported on there in 1931. So it was almost a year later that they had gotten married, but they had kept it a secret because back then you couldn't be married and go through nursing school. And what I'm thinking is that, she got married the week before she graduated. So I figured maybe they placed her somewhere, and maybe you weren't supposed to even do that. But everything I researched said Deaconess, and like a lot of the hospitals, would not allow women to be married. So I just thought that was really interesting, and that they kept till 1931, a year later, before they told people that they were married. And I thought that was interesting. So,
yeah.
I think
but I couldn't.
that's one of the most amazing things, the resilience of women in that time, working
Yeah.
around the system, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't remember her that much because probably she was working, although I couldn't find a record of her working, even in the 50 census. She wasn't working. So, but then they said in her obit that she retired from Deaconess. So I don't know. Her last kid, I think, was born in 41. So she could have, maybe the census just didn't put it in there, or they didn't put it in the census.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
but she had the best oatmeal cookies. These oatmeal crispies are absolutely wonderful. But it's just interesting. But my people are just people that I didn't know, or at least I knew the family. And her kids were old enough to run around with my oldest sister, who was 13 years older than me, and pretty much out of the house by the time I was growing up.
Yeah. 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 Oh, Lynda, isn't it amazing that a little inexpensive book like that has survived for so long?
It is. And the stories, I mean, it's just so much.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
haven't
Yeah.
contacted any of the other people because the other people didn't really um, have kids. I mean, most of those people had kids that were older. Um,
Yeah.
and this is small
Yeah.
too. I didn't mention her, the neighborhood seamstress that helped mom a lot. Her kids were older. They were more my sister's age, my oldest sister's
Yeah.
age. So I really didn't know them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
Claytons, we were, the time they were there, we played a lot and had a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
It rem
And I
I'm
think
just
the recipes, like it's been lovely to hear your actual childhood memories. And you start talking about food and it's amazing where that takes you to. Just memories that are nothing to do with food. But I think yeah, I just found that incredible that, those food memories just last so long, don't they? They really
Well,
do. Yeah.
and when you're baking it, like there's so many of those I've
Yeah.
baked, and while I'm baking it, I feel like she's right there with me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
would have
Yeah.
loved this. She would have absolutely loved me
Yeah.
baking her favorite things.
Yeah. Yeah.
You,
Yeah. I
you
did
know,
love hearing about the sugar adverts. And look where we are now, advertising don't eat sugar.
Well, it's
Yeah.
don't feed your growing kids anything that doesn't have sugar in it. It needs to have sugar to help them grow. And I think about, we always had Kool-Aid is all we drank, but it was sweet.
Yeah.
It sweetened it like
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh,
Any more questions?
I have a comment. The interesting about the sugar is on Sunday I mentioned which I've discovered now from a little research is a Canadian Prairie classic that was served in restaurants all over Alberta and Saskatchewan, which are
ah,
two provinces in Canada, and the flapper pie had only a quarter of a cup of sugar in it because it was probably that would have been in the 30s, 40s that it was very popular, and sugar
Yeah.
was hard to come by.
that's right. Yeah.
And I looked up our more recent recipe, and there's more sugar in it than there was in my uncle's recipe. So I found
And I
that
think,
interesting.
yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Kathy. And I think that, um, like I said in the comments, the 1950s was when suddenly you had all the ingredients you wanted. You had all the sugar and butter you could think of, and you
Mm.
just went through the 1940s and 1930s and 1920s, and you didn't have any of that. And so I'm sure the
Yeah.
1950s and their horrible food resulted a
Yeah.
lot from just an
Yeah.
abundance of things they couldn't have before. So that's
Yeah.
probably part of why the Sugar Council was all over it and why
Yeah.
everything was so sweet in the 50s.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really interesting them pushing that. And of course, you
Yeah.
remember when they were pushing all those low-fat cookies too, when we were like in our 20s or 30s, back in the 80s, I guess, or 90s. What is that one
Yeah.
there's
90s
one company that, all that low-fat
green
cookies,
package. Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to research whether there was whether there was an overage of sugar. Like I wonder if
Surplus.
in the
Absolutely.
50s there was a surplus because they weren't, it wasn't being distributed and it wasn't being embargoed and all of that. I wonder
Yeah.
if there's something
Oh,
to that.
a huge thing here is Hawaii didn't become a state until 1959, but huge tracts of land were all dedicated to sugarcane.
That's
And then
right.
we
Yeah.
have this massive shift as land becomes more valuable in Hawaii that moves over to beet produced sugar in places like Louisiana and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of social history tied to the
Mm.
Farm Bureau, the annual farm policy, or every 4 years, whatever it is. There's some really interesting research to be done. And Lynda, as you were telling the stories of this document from your mother and the neighborhood and the people and ice skating on the driveway, I'm thinking about how that book is a document of one place history. It is a
Yeah.
document of that
Yeah.
neighborhood. It's just marvelous. And these ways we can
Yeah.
tie in social history that was frankly neglected for so many generations because we didn't
Mm.
know who these women were.
No, that's
Exactly.
right.
Exactly. And I think
Tells
we've
you what
become much
matters.
more savvy about how food and culture and world politics all go together. And I think that's why I love this project so much, because it just, um, somebody made a comment on one of my posts. Jen Eggleston made a comment that I was writing micro histories,
Yeah.
and when you put
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
together, you get a macro history. And I
Yeah.
love that, because that's
Yeah.
exactly what
Exactly.
to Linda's mother's cookbook is the same thing, right? You get
Mm.
this whole history that goes beyond the
Yeah.
food.
So I get to
Yeah.
do a shout
Yeah.
out here for Lisa McGuire, who did a
Yeah.
wonderful talk for us a year or so ago. That's one of my top posts. She's a PhD historian who has been doing other things that pay the bills, but she comes in with these fabulous pieces, and has really focused on microhistory and educating and encouraging that in much more of what we all are doing in family history and things like this, little cookbooks and the stories tied in and around them. I'm sure she'll be chiming in the comments
Yeah.
from this
Yeah.
event,
Yeah.
because, day job. But it's
Yeah.
really wonderful to see
Yeah.
that kind of insight, your academic perspective with respect to anthropology and the ways of tying skating on driveways to
Yeah.
the snacks that we had. I have one for you, Jennifer. For Christmas gifts, I would make cookies. And I decided one year to not make chocolate chip cookies because I knew my brother didn't like chocolate. So I made him what I always called Ranger cookies that we had as kids. He loved them. What I didn't know, the same boxes of cookies that went to all the different relatives. My father-in-law basically hardly said anything and sent back a note saying, more cookies, those cookies. So he's a generation older,
Yeah.
came to
Yeah.
America as an immigrant in the early 1950s. And these were what is also what we often call Ranger cookies, or what you call Anzac cookies. It is,
Oh, are
oh,
they?
yeah,
Right.
oatmeal and Rice Krispies. And the magic to Ranger cookies is that what would mix together to make, 2 dozen cookies of something like chocolate chip cookies makes about 4 dozen cookies, because Rice Krispies are so poof and they just
Yeah.
extends the cookies.
Yeah.
It's very cheap to make, and it makes a lot
Yeah.
of cookies at a time when you didn't have much. Personally, I don't care, but he keeps saying more cookies. My husband's leaving on a trip. I should send him cookies. I
Well, we
thought you'd
didn't
like the
have Rice
Australian connection.
Krispies.
Bake some cookies, Barbara.
Make more
Yeah.
cookies.
We all need to taste test now.
Yeah. We didn't have Rice Krispies in our Anzac cookies.
No.
But the Anzac cookies story, we had golden syrup in them. So
Yes.
I don't know whether you have that or
In the import
or
aisle.
yeah. So the Anzac cookies, now that you mention, is quite an interesting story, because where they came from is people baked them and sent them over to their sons and husbands at the war.
Right.
So
Oh,
and that was the cookie they made, because they last forever. You
yeah.
you
Yeah.
can keep them in in your cookie tin for oh in actual fact, my partner found 3 or 4 in there the other night from only just this week, that I would have made at Anzac Day, which is April. um,
Were
there
they
was just
still
3 or 4
good?
left. Yeah, he
Wow.
ate them. He said no.
It's brilliant.
So
That's brilliant
yeah,
cooking.
it is. So that's why they sent them overseas in tins to the
Yeah.
war effort. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we make them every year on Anzac Day. Yeah, it's pretty much the only time we make them now, because we don't eat cookies like we used to, or cakes and bickies and things like we used to.
Which comes back to food history again.
Yeah, yeah,
Again.
it does.
It says
Yeah,
so
And
yeah,
much
now,
about the time you live in, the place you live in. Like
yeah,
I find it fascinating.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I will
And
personally invest my experience in making timelines. See the Lafayette Project and the Stories 250 project. I can do this.
yeah,
And I've had a promised workshop I would do at some point for you, Kathleen, on how to build a timeline using this it's a fancy tool that looks really scary and complicated, but once you understand a few little tricks, it's just not that hard.
Mm.
And it means that you could just keep tossing in line items that you think of later that are really useful. And in a shared environment, I wouldn't expect other people to be in it, but I could take the back end because I can do it in my sleep, and toss things in there like, oh, in 1953, food policy was changed so that the duties on sugar changed to allow for blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I'm making it up. But
Yeah.
It
that
sounded
becomes,
good. It sounded
it
good,
didn't it
Barbara,
though?
whatever
I'm
that
good at
was.
that.
Yeah.
Be really careful
Yeah.
when I lie.
Yeah.
But you get my point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Mm.
That
for
would be
those
really
watching this,
useful.
my
It's a
hands
great
are a bit
idea.
busy
Yeah.
right at the
Yeah.
moment, but
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can
Well,
do something
and
like
another
that.
thing to think about is cake mixes. When were cake mixes? And I did
Yes.
research that. I wrote about that. But when did cake mixes come in? And
Duncan
they were to make
Hines.
women's life easier.
Oh,
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a fun fact about cake mixes from Pillsbury, like Pillsbury's cake mixes,
yeah,
because it was to try to, there was a big push after World War II to try to get women back into the kitchen because
Mm.
they had been in the
Force.
In the
workforce.
factory.
right.
Yeah.
But I've come to appreciate that was sort of a way to stabilize the country. We'd gone through so much in America
Yeah.
for decades, right? And so it was a kind of a way to like, let's just settle everything down.
Settle
So there was
down.
this
Yeah.
big push to get women back home doing domestic things. Cake mixes, Pillsbury's first cake mixes that came out were all you had to do was add water, and they did not take off. Nobody bought them. Nobody wanted to use them. And so they brought in a consultant to say, what do we do? How do we fix this? And he said, add an egg, make them add
Right.
an
Yeah.
egg. And
I remember
that was
reading
it.
about it. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was
Oh,
so
that's so funny.
fascinating because they wanted to feel like they were baking.
Yeah.
And
They were
you
doing
add
something.
water, you don't feel like you're baking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a
But I
comment.
don't know.
Lynda.
I
Sorry.
have a
Go ahead, Lynn.
comment.
Yes.
I think, well, I mean, I grew up in the era where we didn't have power. So most of the baking all had to be, oh, you didn't have any fridges, freezers, anything. So you had to make things that lasted.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
mean, a lot of it was eaten quickly because there were big
Yeah.
families, but you know what I'm saying? When you made something, you had to have well, we didn't have any refrigeration. So everything that was made had to be out.
Yeah.
So that's another
Yeah.
item for that timeline, man, is the
Yeah, for
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
for the
uh
timeline,
the
sure.
Yeah.
introduction of technology like refrigeration and the
Yeah.
all electric
Yeah.
kitchen.
The all
Yeah.
electric kitchen, which a lot of women couldn't plug into their houses. Like they
Yeah.
got these and then they sold them because the houses
Bing.
weren't wired for electric ovens. They weren't wired that way. And
Yeah.
some of these women practiced by taking their cake batter and going over to somebody else in town who had an electric oven so they could try it. And so to your point, Linda, like
Yeah,
a lot of people just didn't have
Yeah.
access
Yeah.
to these things. So they
Yep.
they made things that just are not what we're used to today, which I think is
Yeah.
so fascinating.
It is. As you say, they were very resilient and they just did what they had to do to make it work, didn't they?
Yep.
well, it was like that
Yeah.
flapper pie that
Yeah.
was made because you had egg whites and egg yolks and you could use it all
Right.
Yeah.
in a recipe, right? So there
Yeah.
wouldn't be any waste. That
Wouldn't
was
be
the
any
other
waste.
thing. You didn't
Yeah.
have food to waste.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
eggs were very often accessible. They weren't available in grocery stores, but everybody had a chicken.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was much more
Backyard.
Yeah.
common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
flip side's also true as you think about modern. Every now and then I look at the cooking app from the New York Times Magazine, which is useful,
Mhm.
New York Times publication, because it goes back so far in history and it really shows you through the demand, visibility to the demand in recipes. How many recipes today involve things like uh, chili oil and all kinds of imported ingredients that are
yeah,
just
yeah,
unfathomable. You just could
yeah.
not have imagined these things,
No,
seaweed,
no.
nori, and stuff
Yeah,
like that you
yeah,
would put in food,
yeah,
that ordinary food that you're just putting on some pasta.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Or
Imported
using
food.
olive oil. Or using olive oil.
Olive
I
oil.
mean, there used to be
yeah,
one little bottle on the shelf.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
if it's
now I
rancid.
have millions of oils
Instead of
That's
lard.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Lard.
and
Yes,
vinegars.
lard
Yeah.
was the,
Lard.
yeah.
Lard.
Lard.
Lard's
Yeah.
probably
Great
in a bunch of
concept.
those recipes because you cooked something and you saved, my grandmother was still saving bacon grease long, long
Yeah.
after she had refrigeration and grocery stores with oil in them, but you saved the bacon grease and you
Yeah,
cooked stuff in lard.
My
yeah,
husband
Fry up your
still
yeah.
wants
chicken.
to.
Yeah, fry
And
up
I
your
have a
chicken.
chicken.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So Linda, did your mum actually write about the people at all in the book when she had their recipe in there? When she put the recipe in?
Did you write one? Did she write?
Did she write about the people at all, or
Oh
did she
no, no,
just
no.
write, say
She just
this is
has
from so and so?
their name on the top of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
and it just had their like Mabel Vanstone. And what was really neat about this last page, and this is Mabel Vanstone's, but at the top of it has John 339-4359. And what I know what that is that's my brother. And what
ah,
I think she was cooking, she was making these macaroons. She had it open to this. And he called and he said, "Hey, mom," I'm assuming this, "Hey, mom, I changed my number." So
ah.
she just wrote his number on the top, his new number on the top, because she was in there,
How good.
she couldn't,
Yeah,
she
she
couldn't
couldn't
go and
leave the
stop and
kitchen.
find a piece of paper.
Yeah,
If
You know?
she's
yeah,
anything like
yeah.
me, she spent the next 6 months going, I thought I wrote down his number. Where did I
Yes.
write that?
Where did I put that?
Oh, how good is that? Yeah.
But yeah, she
Oh,
never wrote about the people because she knew the people, and you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
know they probably were in a card club, and that's again part of Mom's diary.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
they were in her card club, and just
yeah,
part.
yeah.
And one of them, Mary Schmaltz, she's got a toffee bar recipe, and Mom's got a big X across it. And I'm thinking, I wonder why she did that. Did she not like it? So, I mean, why would she put her in the book? I mean, I know she liked
Yeah,
I know she was part of the card club and she was a big
yeah.
seamstress when Mom
How
had and
funny.
I found out from somebody, her friend, that, when Mom had problems, she would go to Mrs. Smalls because Mom was a big sore. But anyway, yeah. So it's just like everything. It's just like the diary. There's so much information. I don't have a lot
Yeah,
of, I
yeah,
have a
yeah,
couple
yeah,
Context.
sentences, but from that I
yeah,
can find the
yeah,
stories, and that's what's so exciting.
yeah.
That's
It's
and
quite
that's
Barbara,
amazing.
I was just gonna when you said that about your mom um, putting the X through, some of these recipes in this cookbook that I inherited, they're starred, they're underlined. I don't know why. And
Yeah, yeah,
and I don't know if there's a difference between a star and an underline. And
yeah,
it's like there's something very personal about those notations, but
yeah,
also
yeah,
something very poignant, like you were just
yeah,
saying, Linda, because you can't
yeah,
ask them anymore, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
yeah, anyway.
Well, I
yeah,
still think
yeah,
I'm going to bake it, and it may be because it's similar to, she's got a toffee bar recipe too, so she might have thought, well, mine's just as good as hers. So
yeah.
I don't know. You
She might have thought mine's better than hers, so.
right.
Oh, this has just been absolutely fascinating. I didn't realize, I knew we were talking about food and food stories, but I think we went to memories, quite more than I'd sort of expected today. And it's just absolutely lovely. And especially for me, because our family, when I think food memories, I always think, I don't think we have any food traditions in our family. This is my parents, not my own kids. Um, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think we did, that they were sort of ingrained food memories that we didn't make a big fuss about,
Right.
but they were there. So, it's brought a bit of that back to me too. Yeah. Um, oh, just a huge thanks to both of you, Lorinda and Lynda. You've come along and it's just been, yes, Kathy's clapping and I agree. Absolutely wonderful to hear what you've been talking about today. And, similar topic, but totally different, but with little, likenesses as we went through. So thank you so much for that. Just a point out to next month, we will have two Australian storytellers next month. Jenny McKay from Genealogy Scrapbook and Jill Ball, who's very well known here amongst the blogging community and family history community from Genios. They've both been writing their stories for many years, and I'm looking forward to hearing about their convict ancestors next month. So everyone pop that in your calendar so you don't miss it. It'll be something a little bit different. And thank you everyone for coming along today. I'm sure you've enjoyed hearing these wonderful stories of food and food memories just as much as I have. So once again, thank you, Lynda and Lorinda. It's much appreciated. I'll hand back to you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. When you're talking about, I didn't think we had food traditions in the family. It just really reminds me of how you don't notice what's all around you all the time. And it is only in having these kinds of conversations where we say, oh, yeah, we did that too. Where you can see where the parallels are and the differences. It's really absolutely incredible and delightful to bring the two of you together. That's just a bolt of genius. And for the rest of us to see these things together. From day one, I've been thinking of Duncan Heines. That was always my memories growing up, Lynda, when I saw your Heines site. But that was the first idea of putting pudding into a cake mix. What a genius idea. And here you are describing those moments. And Lorinda, oh my goodness, what a wonderful discovery. And look forward to more of your comments and more of your posts here as an active part of this community. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next
Thank
time.
you.
We'll be dusting up the notes to get out within a couple of hours-ish. I've got to go make some Anzac cookies.
Thank
Yes.
you.